Welcome to the B2B Community Builder Show. I'm your host and Chief Executive Connector, Pablo Gonzalez. We're in episode 224. And today we've got, he wasn't my wedding date per se, but I did meet him at a wedding and shared a wonderful meal, got into some really deep conversations that made this obvious that he's a wealth of knowledge when it comes to entrepreneurship, community building, creativity, how to run a series of events. I've heard about his event, The Thing, for a while, thanks to a friend of the show, Justin Schenk. And I was just really delighted to be next to him. And we got into a conversation immediately that made me think, dude, this guy's got to come on. We're going to get into that one in a second. Terry Weaver, the founder and CEO of The Thing, business coach, author, storytelling aficionado, Disney expert, Star Wars stormtrooper, all the things. Terry, welcome to the show.
Yeah, I tend to think of myself more as a member of the resistance. But, which, dude, honestly, I mean, if you want to talk about one character and one movement that entrepreneurs really are part of, it's the resistance. It's the idea of chasing down this distraction and what at times can feel like the entire galaxy up against you. And you are faced with staring that down the eyeballs, and there's so many distractions that try to keep you off mission and off target and just life. And so, yeah, dude, it was good to hang out with you at the Justin and Lauren's wedding. It was amazing.
The Growth Now wedding.
The Growth Now wedding, or Growth Now Matrimony, as our merchandise proved. And we had matching, a bunch of my buddies from the Thing community. We got matching shirts because they're used to swag and merch. And I was like, Justin loves merch. Let's make some merch.
Dude,
had we been a little more entrepreneur driven, we probably would have had a table in the back, but I felt like we might have gotten kicked out. But yeah, dude, my wife wasn't able to go to the wedding, and I don't think yours was either. So
correct.
It worked out well that we got to hang out, and we got sat, I think, at table 12, and I avoided the dance floor, and we had a great conversation.
Yeah, agreed. I wouldn't say I avoided the dance floor, but I agree with the whole conversation piece. Terry, I want to welcome the community who's in the house right now. We got Lori Goldman, the community super connector in the house. We got Joe Latanzio from Northeast Ohio. Joe, good to have you back, my friend. We got my friend Pratiti Pathak, who's actually from that area close by there where we met. We got Krista, Laura, and another call-in. Good to have you all here. This is a interactive show, so make sure to use the Q&A, make sure to use the chat, make a friend, be part of this thing. And exactly in a little bit under an hour, right at 5:30 Eastern, we go into the open mic session where you are more than welcome to share a speaking point that you want us to discuss or ask for some advice. I got some speaking points to share, and then we really open it up.
I got my iced coffee or iced latte. I'm ready to roll.
I'm
ready to hang.
You're ready.
Your buddy there from Ohio, I will actually be speaking at Social Media Week, Lima, Ohio, coming up the end of Ohio, which is crazy. It's a small town kind of in between Columbus and nowhere. And there's like 300 or 400 people that gather for some of the biggest names in social media marketing kind of come to that one little random town. And so if you're a social media marketer and want to come hang out with us in Lima, Ohio, hit me up. I'm sure I have a code for you somewhere, but
have you been to that before, Terry? I've heard good things about that thing and how like she is very much like about her town and bringing people there. And she's really
dude, she's a powerhouse. Well, actually, this is an example of community and connecting. Someone who came to our event last year, literally on the first night, heard me do my opening keynote for The Thing Orlando and was like, dude, you've got to go do this. Let me tell you about my friend Jessica. And I was like, sure, send me the link. I'll fill it out. And I just randomly, like in the elevator, filled out this, speaking form. And, obviously I got it because of a reference but someone who attended the event, and Angus Nelson, who's a friend and who just moved to Portugal, but he has spoke at the event in the past. And so, what's interesting is there's definitely like a theme of like remarkable people connect with each other, and they definitely find where remarkable people are hanging out. And, it's funny, I'm actually working on kind of version 2.0 of the talk I did to open The Thing last year for Social Media Week. And it's really based on Star Wars. Funny that you bring that up. And I won't give away the big idea, but one of the kind of takeaways I've noticed is it's the 40th anniversary Return of the Jedi. this month. And I took my mom, who took me to the movies in the 80s. And I was like, it's my turn. I'll take you. Tickets on me. And my mom was like, absolutely, I'm in. My mom's super cool. Showed up at her Star Wars t-shirt and was ready to roll. And so I rewatched Empire Strikes Back. And there's this amazing scene in Empire Strikes Back. And this ties into the work that you and I do as well, where Luke is gone to Dagobah to train with a mentor, Master Yoda, this 800-year-old Jedi. And Luke got super frustrated with the process. They were trying to raise the X-Wing out of the swamp. And, this whole process is happening. And Luke's just like, dude, enough. You want impossible. And rather than saying anything, it's because, Yoda's got full of, he's the do or do not, he's got all the quotes. He just stops what he's doing, uses his Jedi powers, and lifts the X-Wing out of the swamp. And I was reminded of just that's really what leadership is. That's what entrepreneurship is. That's what sales is. It's showing people what's possible. And so Luke was so mad at Yoda about the idea of impossible that rather than anything else, Yoda just showed him how it was possible. And he modeled it for him right there in front of him and showed him. And then obviously Luke bought in. And he bought into his own possibility. And I think we're all of us are blessed with the opportunity to be exposed to people that show us what's possible. That we see, you and I before the show we're talking about sports, and we were talking about the great John Wooden and like what he showed us. I love his quote that anything is really possible if no one really wants to get the credit, right? That if we're all working towards something collective, that amazing things can truly happen.
I like that quote, man. You hit on a couple of things, right? You're hitting on leadership, you're hitting on entrepreneurship and storytelling, right? Like as part of kind of like what you just opened up there with, and I really appreciate it. I guess where I would like to go first is this idea of entrepreneurship, right? Like you're a guy you're a successful entrepreneur yourself. You coach a bunch of entrepreneurs, you gather entrepreneurs. I feel like you're a beacon for this kind of like what you're going to in Lima. You have your own gravitational force around you that also attracts that same, frequency of person, or however you want to put it. I think that's the first time I've ever used frequency describing somebody, but I'm starting to buy in on that. And you theme your
it's true, dude, because you and I found each other even at a table because we had something that drew us together, and I think I don't want to blow what that was. You'll ask me that question later in the show, but when you find people who are like-minded, Nashville is just coming off of a weekend of Taylor Swift. 180,000 people came to Nashville, Tennessee. Actually, more than 70,000 people 3 times, whatever the math is on that. I think that's 180,000 came to town to see Taylor Swift. And last night the show should have been rained out, but it wasn't. She didn't take the stage till 10 o'clock at night, played till 1:45 in the morning. And, I think she is a great example of marketing and people who's showing up. Her people identify themselves as Swifties. Yep. And anybody that doesn't think that storytelling matters ought to just pay attention to what Taylor Swift does, because Taylor Swift literally puts up the radar that she's coming. She sold out that thing and it never even went on sale, really. And, we all of those people wanted to be in her kind of orbit. They wanted to be around people. They wanted people gathered at the Taylor Swift concert because they wanted to be around people that seemed normal, to get all dressed up in glitter, and show up and be around someone that believed and acted and thought about things the way that they felt. And
interesting about Taylor Swift, man, my first client ever in this iteration of entrepreneurship is a guy called Brendan Kane, who, I don't know if you've heard of him. He wrote that book, 1 Million Followers.
Yeah.
And he was a personal consultant to Taylor Swift, like earlier in his career. And one of his like claim to fame is like helping her go like really, really viral on MySpace. And he talked about how Taylor had this like deep understanding that the interaction with each and every fan was this like compounding asset and how you make people feel in front of you, and the experience that you provide to them, and this like sense of belonging was like very, very important to her. So as you're saying this, it takes me back to the idea that I'm not surprised at all that Taylor Swift, that the Swifties have become a cult, that she follows all the kind of like community truths of just like create an identity, create shared values, have a mission for everybody, and people show up. 70,000 times 3 is 210,000.
I know that someone said 180,000. I'm like, that math doesn't add up. I'm not very good at math, but that math
in droves. People come in droves. All right. So what I wanted to ask you, man, was you do your events. It's the one thing, right?
The thing.
And there's always a thing that you were talking about, right? When it comes to entrepreneurs, like you and I have had a couple conversations around this, right? But like you just mentioned this idea that entrepreneurship is this idea of making people believe, right? Is that what you would boil it down to? Like, what is an entrepreneur? What's like the thing that you see that as a commonality between entrepreneurs that make it through versus entrepreneurs that end up giving up on it?
Entrepreneurs saw it first. That's what makes them an entrepreneur. There's, obviously, behind me, Walt Disney. If you're watching this on video, if you're listening to the audio version of this, my office is filled with Disney and, Dumbo and Mickey Mouse, giant Mickey Mouse behind my head, all kinds of Star Wars paraphernalia and such. But there's this amazing quote and kind of story that's actually in my book, Making Elephants Fly. You can get it at terryweaver.com. That talks about the opening day of the Magic Kingdom in Orlando, Florida. And somebody came up to rumor. It's one of those stories that's kind of the folklore behind this story has clouded how the story really happened. But it was an interaction where somebody was believed to have come up to Diane Disney and the Disney family and Lillian Disney, Walt's wife. When Walt Disney World opened in 1971, Walt had already passed away. And someone had said, man, don't you wish that Walt could have seen this place? And, they said, yeah, Walt did see this place. And that's why we're here. And the vision is really the one thing that makes an entrepreneur a different being than anybody else on the planet, because they have the ability to see. They have the ability to see it first, and then they have the audacity and belief to actually follow through on that vision and make it real. You can't just be the person that has the idea. You've got to be the person that actually follows through on the idea and follows the idea through the iterations that don't work, and follows the idea through all of the, because I find a lot of people in this space, they'll do something and then you see them make massive pivots. And I'm like, man, I'm going to keep like pounding at the thing until we get it right. And, live events are very much like that, where, it's very much in the trenches, and, the world is changing. I think it's already changed once since we've kind of recovered from the pandemic the first time. And I think we're going through another cycle and another change. And, obviously the rise of, if you're in any kind of entrepreneur community group, everyone and their mother is talking about the effects of AI. And, I've seen infographics about, here's all the jobs that will be at risk because of, the one thing that I can't do is it doesn't have the ability to create. It has the ability to look back and to copy and to reference and to maybe put some things in a blender and spit out something slightly different. But as we've seen, if you've seen a lot of the images from a lot of the image driven AI things, it's like, that's a great picture of Michael Jackson, but he did not have 6 fingers on that hand, and so, there's that human element that AI hasn't been able to figure out. And I don't think it ever will. I'm not saying that it's not going to change how we live, but I do think that as technology is always shifting and changing, and entrepreneurs are just responding to it. And then they're also being stubborn on what their vision is. They're adapting and changing around that thing that really matters most to them. Because, I think the mistake that a lot of people make is they start chasing the money
Yeah.
rather than the thing that gets them out of bed. Because money will get you out of bed a couple days a week, but it won't for years on end. I mean, I've met a lot of miserable folks with more money than they know what to do with. And I've also been in the third world and met the happiest people who may not have money, but are some of the wealthiest, happiest people I've ever met in my life. And so when you can kind of find the happy middle ground and find the joy and the things that light you up and the things that make you want to go and, stay up all night and figure out and solve the problem, because there's going to be roadblocks. There's going to be, things that get in the way. And as a leader, and I use the term leader and entrepreneur kind of interchangeably because in a lot of ways they're the same. If you're not leading anybody, you're probably not an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
So,
I think I kind of talked to you a little bit about this, right? But like when I left the startup that I was a part of, that was kind of like my bridge towards entrepreneurship, leaving the construction industry after 15 years. And I took this like 90-day purposeful pause, and I booked these like 4 conferences to just go kind of like iterate before I decide, like while I was trying to figure out what I want to do in 10 years and reverse engineer, right? I was trying to figure out what my vision was and then go chase it. I heard at the second conference I went to, I heard somebody saying, if you are looking to start a business and you are planning anything other than the thing that you are the best in the world, that you love to do, being the thing that you do within the business, and that thing being the thing that moves the business forward. If you have anything other than that plan, go get a job, because the rest is too hard.
yeah.
Right. And it reminds me of kind of like what you're saying, right? This idea of like, you got to have this vision of what you want to see in the future. And generally that comes from some kind of creative place of like a connection that wasn't there before that you want to connect, and then have the kind of like innovative nature to like design your role within it, and then the stick-to-itiveness to go for it. But it doesn't work unless it's like really the thing that fills you up, or else you're going to be like, I can go get a job and do this, right? Like you can, for people that are talented enough to get almost there, if it's not aligned with who you truly are, it's too easy to just go get a job to do something else to make that money, right?
Yeah. I always am kind of envious of the greeters at Walmart, because, their job is just to say, hey, give some kids some stickers. And then at 4:45, go to the back of Walmart, clock out and go home, and at 5:10, when they throw their keys on the front, hang their keys on the hook by the front door, whatever their routine is, and take off their pants at the end of the day, they are not thinking about those stickers getting handed out. Right. And entrepreneurship is much different than that. It is a switch that is almost impossible to turn off. But I'm also not jealous of it, because I love what I do and what I get to do. I do these things called VIP days, where I spend a day with an entrepreneur. I basically say, hey, all you're paying me for is you're buying me out of my business, and I'm going to get in your business for a day. And it's some of the most fun I have, because it's when I get to go and help them kind of get to the core of what they really want and what really matters to them, and then help them kind of build beyond that and create beyond that, and know what the values for them really are. There's kind of a process and a question I ask, and I call it the Spice Girls question. And it's, tell me what you want, what you really, really want. And dude, you'd be astonished with the number of entrepreneurs, and just the number of people that I talk to over there, they really don't know what they want.
Yeah.
They haven't figured out what it is that they really, really at their core, as their, if we're going Star Wars, as like C-3PO's binary motivator, like what is that thing that like defines what you want out of life? If you don't have that dialed in, man, it makes it really, really hard to get anything, because nothing is going to satisfy you because you don't know what it is that you want. And most of us kind of go to the default of start trying to carbon copy someone else's life. I used to do school assemblies, and I'd meet students all the time that are like, yeah, man, I want to be the next. At the time it was, I want to be the next Justin Bieber. I want to be the next Britney Spears. And it's like, the world doesn't need the next anyone. They need the first you. And, there's a great quote by Howard Thurman that says, what the world needs is people that have come alive. They've found what they want and they've come alive in it. And, man, I want to find people and work with people who have something, that's where the history of the thing is everyone has that thing they want to do. And man, if I can help people do their thing better, and help gather people together who have a mission and a clear purpose and who are moving towards something, I'm all in. Let's go.
Thank you for that, man. And I love again, more scope on the different data points in the ecosystem that you get to touch as a community builder with your events, spending the day in the business for someone on these VIP days, stuff like that. And this idea that it's like getting true clarity on what people want and finding your true north is the thing that's gonna keep you around. And yet you have an event coming up in a month, right? In Nashville, if anybody's in the area, the thing it's happening in like 4 weeks, you said.
Yeah.
And
June
and
2nd
the
and
theme
3rd.
of it, huh?
June 2nd and 3rd.
June 2nd and 3rd. And the theme of it is how to be truly seen. Is that the theme of it?
We're really gonna, one of the things that I think is I have noticed in the past 6-8 months, looking in my community and in these conversations, and that's what makes coaching so powerful, dude, is like you're able to kind of craft and move towards, because you're basically always, you're under the hood and you're realizing what problems are coming down the pike. Because, when you see it in high performing leaders, when you see it in like, leaders that have stepped into really doing this, it's gonna eventually show up in everyone. And that's this idea of being known. We all want to be known. We all want to be, but most of us really struggle with the idea of fame. I watched a documentary yesterday, and this sounds awful to even say in a sentence, but it was like the $1 billion dynasty of the Kardashians. And I'm fascinated by the Kardashians.
Yeah, makes sense.
Because Mama Kardashian, dude, is a master storyteller, a master brand builder. She knows how to, that family it will not go away. And not only are they not going away, they're making billions of dollars in the process. And they have leveraged attention better than anyone in the world. And what if people with really clear missions and really big purposes used that same power? What if hope was screaming louder than lipstick? Like, what if we were consumed with organizations doing good rather than what shoes is Kanye going to release tomorrow? And the problem is a lot of people really, really struggle with leveraging attention and being okay. Because, dude, having a background in the music business and knowing that, Taylor Swift's a prime example. In order to get her to the stage on this tour, they load her up in a janitor cart and roll her through the crowd because she can't walk, because there's an expense of being known, right? And so a lot of us, and I'm not suggesting to anybody that they need to be that well known, because I think that's a headache that most of us aren't wired for. But we're entering a time where I just heard Shailene Johnson talking about this in an interview with Sean from Think Media about how people are more likely to listen to, I think she used the phrase nano influencers. How brands are looking for people with 100 to 1,000 people that pay deep and close attention to them. We've all heard of 1,000 true fans. And rather than, thinking about, I couldn't sell out a stadium 3 times this weekend, but man, you and I have a small auditorium hanging out with us right now, that's influence. And if we can leverage that influence to hopefully do some good and to make an impact, and I hope that's what we're doing in our time together. I hope we're helping someone get focused on the things that matter the most to them and not distracted by the things that don't, so they can actually be of some use to themselves and to the world, right? And yeah, so man, that's kind of one of the things we're really going to be focusing on, and it's really going to it's going to trickle over into what we do in Orlando as well this November, which I've heard rumors that you're going to be joining us, and
These are real rumors.
And yeah, man, it's what's really interesting is doing this work for the amount of time that I've done it. You meet so many people that you're like, man, how did that guy get attention? Like, why is that the guy that that the light's on? It's basically just he stood in the light. He got up front and created content and repurposed content and started talking. You either love or hate Gary Vee, but you can't ignore him. because he's everywhere. You can love or hate Grant Cardone, but you can't ignore him because he's everywhere. And yeah, Lori just said in the comments she loves Gary Vee. Dude, I really love this iteration of Gary Vee.
I'm a huge
I
Gary.
love humble Gary Vee.
Yeah.
I love happiness Gary Vee.
Yeah.
I've been with Gary, I mean, since, Crush It came out, 10,
The
15
first one?
years ago.
Yeah.
And, I've got the shoes to prove it, right? And in fact, those K-Swisses are some of my favorite, most comfortable pair of shoes.
The original ones, those like green and black ones?
The green
Or
and
like
black
yellow?
ones, dude.
Yeah, cool.
I still roll with those.
Yeah.
Those are my go-to if I have to actually wear shoes. I kind of live in sandals.
Yeah.
And so, in fact, I think I wore those to the wedding that I met you at.
Yeah.
Just because, man, I'm not a big shoe wearer. But yeah, dude, I love Gary Vee that he's kind of moved to this, like, man, be happy. Do the things that really light you up. Because entrepreneurship is hard.
Yeah.
So
I love it, man. I'm a huge Gary guy. Hate Grant Cardone, right? But like, I get it. And since I am one of these folks that has reverse engineered all that stuff, put out a ton of content and show up everywhere, I get a lot of these questions, right? Like my podcast that I released on Saturday was just a call I took with somebody that was centered around the other side of this, like being known thing, right? There's folks that want to be known and come to us with advice on like, man, how do I get out there? But in the conversation that you and I had at the wedding, the other side of that was this idea of people's fear of really being known, right? Like wanting to be known, but do you really want to be known for your true self and people's reservations around that, if I remember correctly? What do you think about that, man? Where do you think that comes from? And how can people kind of get over that piece?
it's interesting, dude, because it's May when we're having this conversation, which happens to be Mental Health Awareness Month. And, I grew up as, my background was I got into this somehow. I was a youth pastor in the early 90s, late 90s. And I started traveling and speaking because I was a good communicator. When I was 16, I spoke to 3,000 college students, and that kind of started opening doors and unlocking just kind of a level of boldness to say, you know what, I can do this. And I traveled, around the country and around the world speaking. And, I used to really struggle with the idea of mindset mattering. And man, dude, 90% of the work I do these days, before I can fix your business, before we can get to that other stuff, if your mindset's not right, it doesn't matter. And, we mentioned Mental Health Awareness Month. We have my friend Jennifer Street is at Everything event. She's a licensed therapist and trauma specialist. In Nashville, we have Justin Mosley, who's the mindset doctor, and Jason Duncan, who really helps business leaders get their mind right about stepping out of their business and letting their business serve them, not the other way around. And, we really have really kind of rebuilt the work we do to really set up helping people get their mind figured out, because quite often, and this is a sad reality, dude, but it's just what it is, that we are most often what's standing in the way of our own success.
True story.
That our limiting beliefs and, people of faith really kick back with that. Say, well, dude, I can show you scripture after scripture that prove the fact that, the book of Proverbs is a masterclass on getting your mind right and getting your heart right and finding what really, really matters. And, that I think if you really want to make an impact and you really want to accomplish things, and you find that, your mind is what's keeping you from it. I think the first question you need to look at is the conversations that you're having with yourself, because those are the conversations that matter. The second is, who are the people that are speaking into your life, both from afar and up close. And if you're not part of a community, if you haven't invested in coaching and people speaking into your life on an ongoing basis, I encourage you to change that. This is not a solo sport. This is very much strategic relationships. I remember Peyton Manning standing up, opening a conference I was attending, and he had just finished, he had just stepped down, and he opened with this line that everyone needs a coach. And he's like, and I just hired a new one. And I was like, dude, you just quit. You've had a coach all your life. He's like, no, for this next phase of where I want to go, I know that I need new knowledge and new help to get where I want to go. And so don't underestimate, the things that your mind and your self-talk really has the ability to affect kind of every outcome of your life.
So true, man. Right? Like I think we're so accustomed to hearing the whole like you are what you eat, right? Like you are what you eat, you are what you drink, you are what you breathe. But I think it's like you are what you consume, right? And if what you're consuming is whatever you're telling yourself or whatever the people around you are telling you that isn't right for you, it's going to be very hard to build something with those inputs, right? Like we're all a sum of these inputs, and getting that dialogue right in your head, right? Like I think Brene Brown says it really well of just like that person inside your head is often the least kind person that you speak to, and how your relationship with that voice is going to be such a big part of it. And I see it all the time with people that can't give themselves the validation to make content about the thing that they care about, right? Like the call that I took last week was this guy that's ton of success in the startup world, about to go into like a founder brand kind of led startup software. And he was asking me for advice on marketing and product. Like, I'm like, dude, like the fact that you're asking me for advice is comical to me. Like I'm just like your resume is insane, right? Like, and it was just getting past that piece. And that to me is something that I've struggled with a lot in the past myself, right? Like for me, it's come in the way of, oh, well, I can't carry this all. And it led to the big aha conversation that I had with you when I was just kind of telling you about, I feel like I just figured out that nobody's going to do it for me, and that it's not about like finding the right partner as much as like understanding what I can do and going and executing on it. And you told me something super profound, which was that you see that most people's first partnership is generally an exercise in self-worth. Can you
Yeah.
tell me kind of like what you think about like where that came from and your beliefs around that? Because that was super transformational for me.
Yeah, dude. I mean, I am a collaborative king. I rarely do anything where I don't collaborate. I'm in the middle of 3 book projects right now that are collaborative projects. But that being said, I've definitely had some partnerships which were really about my lack of self-belief in myself. And that doesn't mean I didn't learn anything. I mean, I had a business partner where I kind of came alongside him, and I realized like, whoa, dude, like I'm writing all of your content. Like you're an inch deep and a mile wide, and I am, helping you create, all of this content, where at the time we had launched a, $1 million membership program together. And we did it off of, his brandiness and his knownness, but it was my abilities and my genius that really allowed the thing to happen, and the architecture of it, even on a subject that I understood nothing about, which was at the time online membership communities. I live outside of Nashville, Tennessee, and I knew Michael Hyatt, who wrote the book Platform. I knew him when he was, running Thomas Nelson Publishers. And so like I'd seen him around town, and, we'd run into each other at different events. But other than that, I knew nothing about them. This was way back in like 2012, 2013. And so, I was definitely well aware of those things, but it wasn't until I really understood that, I kept making these decisions based on my lack of belief in myself. And a lot of that is because, we often don't do the work to be known. That thing we were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
We often don't do that work on a consistent basis.
Yeah.
Because sometimes hiding is much easier. It's easy to be small. It's easy to be unseen. Because when you're seen, we've all seen, especially in this culture we live in now, dude, like no one wants to be canceled. But anybody that's saying and doing anything remarkable is being canceled. What's interesting about cancel culture, I heard a great conversation between 2 comedians who couldn't be more different than each other, John Christ and Bert Kreischer, on Bert Kreischer's podcast. And John Christ is a faith-based, lives here in Nashville, comedian, and he had basically been canceled for essentially doing what most of comedy is about. But because his audience was faith-based, people believed him to be something different than he was. So the messaging he was putting out was out of alignment with how he was acting. And that's when, at its core, cancel culture is just bad messaging and bad marketing. And it was Bert Kreischer who kind of came up with that. And if you know who Bert Kreischer, you're about to see a movie with him. Huh?
The Machine?
The Machine is coming out. And so starring Luke Skywalker, of all people, is his dad in The Machine. Oh. And, it's really, really interesting that how much of a lot of our success is tied in the fact that we are most comfortable hiding.
Yeah.
Because we're not designed, fame isn't something that any of us are like made for. Nobody wants that level of exposure, but you have to realize that that thing you want is often behind your ability to be heard. And if you can't be heard and you can't be seen and you can't be known, you don't need to be canceled because you're already silent.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about that. Let's say we punch past that, right? Like we embrace being known, right? Like we embrace collaboration the right way, right? Like not to hide behind something, but someone that magnifies you, right? Like ways that you can truly create good collaborations. And let's get into Joe's question here, right? So Joe's got the question saying, how do you become a better storyteller? Where do you suggest a place to start? There's so many charlatans out there. And I feel like you as like King Disney fan over there has to know a thing or two about getting good at storytelling.
Funny, one of the projects is around storytelling. And as a podcaster and someone who interviews, it's one of the things. I've had a lot of interviews with the friends that I've not been able to air because they didn't know what to say to tell their story. And so that's actually a solution we're trying to. A lot of times the things that you should be working on kind of show up in your face. And collaboration can be a really powerful tool. I had a realization a couple of years ago, dude, that I was going to die with my ideas. That I had all of these things that I wanted to do, book ideas, course ideas, collaborative events. And I was like, I'm never going to get to that. So either I delete the file or I find someone that can do it. And I have this kind of like process, that I say that, we chase ideas, but our best ideas stalk us. And once an idea kind of starts to wake me up at night, I realize I've either got to act on it in some way or I've got to find another champion for the idea. And so I have gotten to the point where I'm looking for more people to collaborate with on ideas, kind of one-off. Hey, let's focus on this. And, you asked, how do you get better at storytelling? You just tell stories. You focus on, story brand is really interesting. It's a marketing framework, but the one thing story brand doesn't actually tell you how to do is how to tell stories.
How to tell an actual story.
How to tell an actual story. And I love Donald Miller. We both live here in Nashville.
Yeah.
And there's a theme of a lot of us living in Nashville for some reason. And
yes,
that's that proximity. We all just kind of end up here, right?
Yeah.
But there's this thing with story, dude, that story doesn't happen alone. One of my favorite books, I'd grab it, but it's weird to get up and go off camera mid conversation. But it's Disney does this series called The Art of. Anytime they do like a park or a movie, they'll come out with the art of, there's the art of Galaxy's Edge, and it's all like the concept art, right? But Pixar has the art of the story room floor. And Pixar has this like process where we've all heard of brainstorming, right? But they have what they call the brain trust. And it's this creative group across kind of all of the disciplines of the company that get together basically just for a WWE style Royal Rumble of ideas. Let's throw the best ideas in the ring and see who wins. And let's all serve nothing but great ideas. And so if you want to be better about storytelling, the first thing I would tell you to do is to stop trying to do it alone. And I would become a student of it. In fact, I have two clients of mine that have story-driven kind of companies. One is Chad Illa Peterson, and he helps speakers and authors and writers figure out what is their signature story and how to tell it better.
Mm-hmm.
And Ryan Hulk, who was working on this book together, actually, he has
Who's
a brand
speaking at
called
your event,
Story
right?
Distillery that actually helps people distill their stories for brands and how to actually learn how to. The project we're working on is really helping people know what are the stories that you should kind of be a master of,
Mm-hmm.
so that you can take any question that somebody asks. Because you ever watch a celebrity, on media or like talk shows, Tonight Show, whatever, most of them have been through media training and they've learned, Bill Clinton has always been a master of this. Whatever you think about Bill Clinton as a politician,
Yeah.
whatever conversation Bill Clinton's having, Bill Clinton is telling his story from his perspective and he's getting his point across.
Yeah.
And yeah, man, storytelling is definitely, it's interesting because you mentioned charlatans. It's funny because it's hard to find people who really genuinely are going to be helpful in that area, because there are so many sketchy folks out there. And if you're a good storyteller, you can cover up a lot of sketch.
It's true. So I went down this rabbit hole about a year and a half ago, right? Like I decided it was actually before that, right? Like I was really impacted. I've always been like a big Kobe Bryant fan. And I was really impacted by the idea that when Kobe left the NBA, he went on Lewis House's podcast and was like, the next thing I want to master is storytelling. And I was like, oh shit, I guess I need to pay attention to that. So it kind of started getting on my radar. And I've read a bunch of books on it, right? Like I've read like Save the Cat, is that like screenplay storytelling? That's really cool. I've read Donald Miller. I haven't read the Hero of 1,000 Faces, but I have like 5 storytelling books back there, and they all kind of have very similar frames around the story, which is this idea of like character, context, conflict, big idea, journey towards resolution, and then all these other kind of like moving parts. And for me, Joe, the book that I read, like it was like the 5th book I read. It's called The Narrative Gym for Business. I put a link in the chat. This guy, okay, I think we just lost him. This guy, Park Howell, found Randy Olson, who is like a science storyteller, and distilled his storytelling framework. It's called the ABT, and it's the and, but, therefore. And it is essentially a really, really simple way of inserting story into everything, where it does a like, and is basically the character and context, right? Like it's like you establish the world as it is now, and the change that you want to see, or the thing that's happening, or the character in it, and then you insert the conflict, but, and that's like what really is at the essence of story, is how you insert conflict into things. And then the therefore is the big idea to resolve, right? So that to me has been the simplest framework for storytelling. If you can figure out how to like build consensus with a statement that tells you of a character and a context that makes people be like, yeah, that character and that context exists, but you insert some conflict into it, and therefore here's the big idea of what we need to resolve, and you go from there. It sets up a lot of stories. And for me, the practice originally came from like networking and stuff like that. But if I was to start again, I would tell myself I'm going to go live on Facebook for 30 days in a row and try to tell a story with that framework over and over again. And you'll quickly get to the repetition of figuring that piece out. The book itself is like a 70-page book, super easy to get through in one day, and highly, highly recommended. I put it in there. Terry, how you doing, man?
Man, I hate Zoom with the passion of 1,000 hells. It's decided that after about an hour on Zoom, it doesn't think I should hear the audio of the person, and Zoom it like clocks out. It's now union.
Well, lucky for us, Terry, I can fill up as much space as we need, and
I think you probably answered the question, dude. Storytelling is one of those things that you could miss the mark on, and the only way you can get better at it is everyone who I know. It's like, man, what a masterful storyteller. And they've all been someone who's found a way just to tell stories. And you're right, dude. Go live on Facebook. I don't know that Facebook lives are the thing. I might
just
try
whatever
Instagram.
you can do it on. Yeah.
I mean,
Instagram Live.
honestly, it's not even about anybody showing up. It's about you showing up.
Practice,
And that's half of business is quit worrying about who's in the audience. I know we want to be known. If you can get 5 people who know you, and you have a product that's priced properly, you could have a successful business. I know people that have 3 clients. That's all they need. They just need to be known to the right 3 people. And you had asked me earlier, and I was about to answer that before we got on the story rant. How do you kind of break through? How do you get kind of through this next? And the answer is yes. If you want to be a better storyteller, the answer is yes. How can you show up and talk and get better at it? You want to be a better podcast guest? Go be a podcast guest. Dude, I rarely say no to podcast guest opportunities. Now, granted, with you asked, and I was like, dude, I will clear my schedule for the first time you have availability. I can't do that for everyone, but I do my best to make myself available. And I'm kind of similar with live speaking. Now, granted, I've had more than my 10,000 hours on stages. I told my mom when I took her to the movies I was explaining the 10,000 hours concept to my mother. She's like, "Oh, you've had way more than 10,000 hours." She's like, "I've heard 10,000 hours of you on a stage." And I'm like, "I'm sorry, Mom. I still love you." But it's true, right? Like, people are like, how do you get to be such a great communicator? Well, I eventually have learned the art of listening to a room and learning. And then the same thing with answering questions, dudes. It's like, I don't want to know what question you're asking. I want to know what you really want to know. What's the question behind the question that you're asking? That's what I really want to get at.
You know what I love where you went there, man? And I agree, right? Like it's really practice, right? Like for me, my ability to speak on stage dawned on me as an aha moment. I don't know if I told you this, but everything that I'm executing on these days doesn't really come from my first 15 years in construction or anything I learned in college. It comes from when I was 29 till I was about 37. I happened to build up multiple young professional groups for different charities in Miami, get on the boards of charities. And that whole like arc of my story is where I really practiced my soft skills. And within them was speaking on stage. And I remember clear as day, probably about like year 4 of doing that stuff, right? You do enough of these like, hey, welcome to this volunteer thing, or hey, here to moderate a panel, or blah, 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 that I pulled off my biggest event. There was probably about like 200 people in the room, came on, I did this big welcome thing, thanked the sponsors, kept it engaging, told the direct, all this stuff. And I came off stage and my buddy, Greg Deutsch was just like, dude, when the hell did you learn to speak in public? Like you didn't say or but or anything like that. And I was like, I don't know, just kind of practice. But I love where you went with it. And it wasn't, you said, I'm a great communicator because I learned how to listen to a room. And I think that that's really underappreciated, right? Like most people think of the great communicator as the person that's the orator and can enunciate, but it all starts in listening. And I believe that Gary Vee's the greatest communicator of our generation. And it's because he's the greatest listener of our generation. I think he's got all the lines in the water that are listening all the time, which make him a phenomenal communicator. I would love for you to expand on why you went to listening when it came to communicating.
And dude, Gary's a great example of that. And I think with Gary, what's interesting is I recently, and I'm going to offend somebody, and it's not as successful today if I haven't offended somebody, but kind of on my bucket list of people to see live speak was Gary Vee and Tony Robbins. And they were both doing a Success Resources event. And I knew what Success Resources was. It was in Orlando. I knew it was going to be a bunch of like sales people. It was a loss leader. I knew exactly what it was.
Yeah, it was a pitch fest. I went to that too.
It was a pitch fest. And I knew I could use it for that purpose. And so I let myself like, hey, I'm going to go. And so we went to go see Gary, and Gary was he great communicators shrink rooms. This was at the Amway Center, and And that's the opposite of what Tony Robbins did. I thought Tony Robbins was going to blow the doors off the back of the arena. It wasn't. It was Gary for me. All that Tony had going for him was a killer DJ. Because literally every time the crowd kind of fell off, it was Black Eyed Peas for 10 seconds. And everybody gets the big, Tony Robbins, hand clap going. And dude, I think one of the things when it comes to listening to a room is you have to really ask yourself when you're on a stage, like, why does anybody care that I'm up here? And then what do I want them to care about when I leave? In fact, I'm kind of working on a framework right now of you guys are kind of getting the first like little bit of that, of like if you were to interrogate a talk before you were to give it on a stage, like what are the things that you would ask that talk? And most people just get on a stage with a point to make rather than trying to actually help anybody or try to actually move anyone towards anything. And if you don't have a clear mission and goal when you get on a stage, you're going to just wander around the desert.
Great advice. Well, you had, like, I got lost in your story there, but you said something. Great communicators shrink a room. I love that, man. That's a cool card right there,
dude. I mean, if you've ever watched Gary,
yeah,
when Gary is answering, because he's Q&A, he's the goat of it, right?
He's the king. Yeah. He
literally almost like reaches out like he's a ballad singer, like Whitney Houston singing "I Have Nothing." Like he literally, like, he sucks that person, and he almost always flips the script. He almost always takes, and that's a lot of times great storytelling is really just shattering expectations. Take Disney, right? Take Bambi. Who'd have thought you'd go see a kids movie where the literal plot of the movie is deer jerky? Like this dad, right? Like, and then we have an orphan deer. And then after you're shocked and awed over that, Disney tells a masterful story after they've got your attention.
Yeah.
And what most people don't plan on is what do they do once they have the attention? Seth Godin, one of my favorite Seth Godin, and I love Seth Godin. He has an entire coffee table book based on this. Is, quit trying to get your ducks in a row and start asking, what are you going to do with the duck? Like, once you have my attention from stage, now what? What are we going to do? Where are we going? And what do I want you to do with, like, what we did together?
Awesome, man. Awesome. Terry, we have let our panelists on. We're going to move into the open mic session. Before I let you go, man, or, you're obviously welcome to stay. I think you've cleared out your schedule. I just never expect anybody to do so.
No, dude, I'm here.
But where do people, if they want more Terry, they want more story, they want to go to the thing in 4 weeks, or they want to go to the one in Nashville in November, where do people find you? Where do people connect with you?
Well, Nashville is June. Orlando is November. For the thing stuff, go to thething.live. In fact, if you're kind of unsure about what your thing is, you can go to discoveryourthing.com. And I've got an amazing quiz that you can take. And it kind of helps put you where you're at as an entrepreneur. In fact, I have the script right here for a new course we're about to launch based kind of on, help people find their thing and really hone in on that. And so that's a Discover Your Thing. And obviously, all things Terry Weaver at terryweaver.com. You can get my book. In fact, the next episode I'm about to release, I've been kind of dormant on my podcast.
I saw that.
And yeah, just because, everything has seasons, and I've been in a season where I've been really in the weeds helping other people.
Yep.
So but I actually have a great David Hutchison, who has a book called Story Dash. We have a great conversation about story. And so if you're a story guy, definitely go subscribe to the Making Elephants Fly podcast. And yeah, man, definitely sign up on my email list. But if you do the Discover Your Thing, that gets you on my email list. And I'd love to have anybody that wants to join us in November in Orlando or in June here in a few weeks. If you're an action taker, my favorite people over the years have been people who took action, said, oh man, your event's a month away. I'll be there. And those have been the people that I've seen that have really just broke through because they took action, they stepped into it, and they didn't wait. They're like, I'm not waiting to November. Let's go. And so, but thething.live takes you to all the thing. You can pick which city you want to go to. And yeah, man.
I love it, man. Listen, I know you say yes to a lot of podcast requests. I know that you've also given me special treatment of doing the onboarding call, clearing your schedule. And I just gotta, before we go into open mic session, man, I just really want to thank you, right? Like that conversation we had at Justin's wedding was so eye-opening for me. From the moment we speaking, your wisdom was eminent. But what really got me, man, and I don't know if you know this, but like at some point, Justin came over. He's like, "Hey, man, I didn't really know what table to put you in." And you like looked at him, you're like, "Oh no, this guy belongs in this table. He's good." And that to me, man, it was just like a really, really special moment of, when you're in this space and you're not sure if you're known or you belong there or whatnot. That kind of like olive branch of validation really set the tone of the evening for me, man. And I want to acknowledge that because I think you probably do that for a lot of people. And it was a special moment for me, man. And I'm pumped for our friendship. And thank you for doing this, bud.
Yeah, dude. And I think at the end of the day, if you're a leader, that's the business you're in, is setting tables. Setting tables for people to gather at around those things that matter the most to you. And sometimes it's a table at somebody else's wedding. And you ought to look at every situation that you find yourself pulled up to a table at. Is how can I bring more than I can take? What can I bring to this that makes everyone better? Not because of some like agenda or some like, if you want to talk about Gary, dude, the 51-49 rule is the most important rule in business, that you want to bring more value than you take. And a lot of times I think I try to live way beyond 51%. And I want to bring as much value to every table that I'm at and every conversation, every relationship I get to be a part of. So, dude, it was an honor to meet you and it was an honor to be on the show. And I imagine we'll do it again soon.
I imagine so, man. I appreciate that.